Hey everyone, Vanessa Gracia Cruz here. Thanks for tuning into the Maven House podcast. I want to remind you guys that we've got tons of free resources, free Bible studies, and lots going on becomeamaven.com, the official platform of Maven House. This month we're coming out with a free Bible study on God's love for us, a new course called Activate Your Spiritual Life, which covers prayer, hearing the voice of God, aligning your emotions to the Holy Spirit, and loving others. And we've got so much more. So if you're not familiar yet, becomeamaven.com has a space for a monthly membership where you can be part of the community, exclusive lives, coaching and mentorship opportunities, and much, much more. Make sure you check it out. Hey everyone, and welcome to this week's episode of the Maven House podcast. My guest today is a more difficult guest to get than any of the other guests I've ever had. Possibly more difficult than the President of the United States. Possibly more difficult than, I don't know what else to say, but he's a very difficult guest to get, and it is my wonderful husband, Rico Cruz. Thank you for agreeing to be on the Maven House podcast.
I'm happy to be here. It's quite an honor.
Are you really happy to be here?
No.
Why don't, before we begin with our topic, why don't you like being on podcasts, lives, my stories, things like that?
Okay. It all starts when I was 6 years old.
Wow.
It doesn't. I just have a general preference of, I don't want to be on camera. It's nothing personal. People ask me all the time, can you stop and take a picture? I have to run as quickly as I can.
Sorry, that made me laugh. You run as quickly as you can away from that person.
I flee. So it's all about being intentional. And I'm very intentional on that. So I just don't like it. It's a thing of, you know how you post your pictures and then you see the pictures people tag you in? Mm-hmm. It's a constant that.
So you feel like every time you're on camera, like you just don't come out the way that you'd want.
I'm constantly misrepresented.
Okay, you're being funny today. Okay, anyway, I wanted to have you on the podcast though because people constantly DM me, write me, or come up to me in the hallways of our church and say, when is Rico going to be on the podcast again? So people love you in all of your misrepresented image that you feel like you have. So I think that people are going to be very excited about today's podcast. And I knew that I wanted to have my husband on again because I love the conversations that I have with him, but we weren't sure what topic we were going to do because I kept asking him, what topic would you like to do if you come on the podcast? And he kept saying, whatever you want, Vanessa, I don't care. So literally, so I took it to, like a good millennial, I crowdsourced it and I took it to my stories. And I asked people what they would like to hear us talk about. And by an overwhelming majority, like literally it was the most common received answer. People wanted to know, and they asked this question in different variations, but they basically wanted to know the dynamics of our relationship. They wanted to know, the way they usually phrased it was, how do you guys do everything that you do? So what are some of the things that you would say this is, and again, I don't want to make it seem like we're saying that we have it all together, but what are some of the things that you would say this helps us be able to kind of do all this without pulling our hair out?
I really think that it's important to, at least have a structure, something that you can fall back on. Early on in our parenthood, I guess, we had a really rigid structure where we came up with the bedtime system, and I don't know if that's what it's called, but we just know when bedtime is, and it's usually around 7 for the kids, not for us. And doing that helped us, one, put the kids down, give them a bath, give them a routine, use the white noise, use the red light. It helped us, give the kids something to understand, to like, okay, it's time for me to go to bed. But besides that, it opened us up to having the evenings to ourselves. If we want to work, if we want to watch TV, if we just want to hang out, have quality time, we can do that. And I think that helped us a lot. I hear, I try to help out other parents, other young dads who are in similar predicaments, and sometimes it seems like they lack that, and I just think that it has to be started at some point. Even if it's tough, it has to be done, because as a parent, you need like your time, and that needs to be prioritized. So that's what I think has helped.
I agree 100%. I think that people coming into having kids and getting married, we kind of carry over a lot of the FOMO from our younger days, and so I say that because like we want to have younger kids and have responsibilities and start businesses and stuff, but we also want to be able to go out as much as we want and go everywhere that people invite us. But one thing that Rico really helped me see, because I have a lot more FOMO than you, but you helped me see the importance of structure and what that translates into my brain now. And now I tell a lot of my mentees this, it's routine. We tend to think that if we have a routine, we're trapping ourselves, like, no, I don't want things to be the same every day. I don't want to put my kids to bed the same way every day, or I don't want to do this, the same way every day. But what I've realized, especially over the past few years, is that routine is not a trap. It frees you, because when you free up your brain from having to think, how am I going to do this tonight? When you just think one time of the best way to do something and you make that a routine, things go so much quicker. Like, I notice how sometimes people come over our house and they see us putting our kids to bed and they're like, how do you put them to bed so quickly? And I'm like, because the PJs are in the same place every night. And the kids, like you said, they know what to expect. So they literally they know what's coming next. And they'll be like, okay, so what's coming next is this. And like everything flows because we're not reacting every night. We have a good routine that is well thought out. So we're just acting every night, And like I said, the PJs are in the same place. It's happening at the same time. We even have similar, like our kids, sometimes we'll go out of the box after we put the kids to bed, but our kids have similar dinners every night even. Because like we know what they like. We know what they're not going to fight about. We know how to prepare these dinners. They see us picking out their clothes the night before, and all of those things kind of create these healthy routines.
So yeah, I think that's one way. Our kids have it down. Levi will instruct someone who isn't their usual bedtime person. He'll instruct them on what they need to do. Okay, my PJs are over there. I need my bottle. I need my Pampers. Mm-hmm. So he knows, and it helps give them a sense of safety. I feel like Absolutely. It gives them a sense of, okay, this is what I need to do in order for me to go to sleep. Do they often go to sleep sometimes when we put them in bed? No. Sometimes they'll stay up talking. Sometimes they'll stay up singing, whatever it is. But it gives them a sense of like, okay, this is what needs to happen. As opposed to like sometimes in my childhood, we would be like in different occasions, different parties, different events. And I'd end up having to fall asleep on some couch or some person's, bed. I didn't know who lived there, but we were there. And it's not that it's bad anytime that happens, but it does kind of like, you do think about like, man, I wish I were home. I wish I could do this. I wish I could do that. Which sometimes we hear people tell us, oh, but why didn't you bring the kids? This and that. And if it's after 7, they kind of like, no, that's kind of like our cutoff time. So even on Wednesday service, I've never once brought the girls to a Wednesday service. Like, we've never done that because 1, it's past bedtime, and 2, like, they know what they have, and it helps the kids. It helps us. We have freedom to be able to, do whatever. Even if it's just, watch The Office downstairs. So I think that helps us. I don't know if that helps people, but it certainly helped us.
Yeah, I mean, I think what we're communicating to people, not everyone's going to be able to do the same thing we do, but that's not what people ask. People ask what works for us. And you've taught me so much of that, because one thing that my husband is so much better at than I am is, first of all, sticking to the routine, which he's had to remind me a lot over the years. Like, let's stick to the routine. Even though I might seem like the more organized one, I am good at coming up with the routine, but I'm also easily susceptible to, but come on, let's just go out to dinner, or come on, let's just do this, or like, come on, let's go outside. But he has really taught me that it's true. It creates security. And that routine also, like I said, it does help us be more effective, because We know what to, the same way the kids know what to expect, we know what to expect. And even as I'm hearing that story, and so many of us, especially those with Latino backgrounds, have that kind of experience where it's like, I was here and I was falling asleep. In my case, I wouldn't be at a party or somebody's house, but I'd be at church and I'd be falling asleep on the, have very PK memories, pastor's kids memories. Like, you put all the chairs in church together. If you line them all up, they make a bed. So if any pastor's kids are hearing me, they can identify with that. But when I look back at that, I think like, man, my mom probably had to do so much work. Like if your kids are falling asleep and then you don't know what time they got home, and then waking them up for school the next day is so difficult, and you eliminate so much of that difficulty just by having a good, well thought out routine. And I think another thing that works for us, if I had to bring up one thing, I would say teamwork too, because I think one thing that's unique about us is that, first of all, we really do divide the work pretty evenly. And if the work is ever not going to be even, because life is life and things happen and things get in the way, we have a very good way, I think, of kind of negotiating with each other and being like, hey, I'm not going to be home for bedtime, but I'll wake up tomorrow instead with the kids. Or, you'll tell me I'm not going to be home all day today. I'm out filming, or I'm out doing this, or I'm out doing that, but I'll make sure I'm home for bedtime and you can take time off and you can put the kids to bed. And I don't know if you want to say anything about that, but I feel like that's one of the keys that helps us get things done, because neither one of us is overwhelming the other person with all of the housework, which I've seen a lot. I've seen people be like, okay, one of us works outside the home and the other one is home doing all the work. And when you do that, I think you limit the couple, because again, one person is able to do things outside the home, but the other person can only accomplish things inside the home. Whereas if you split it 50-50, then we're both able to give some of our gifts to our passions outside the home. But at the same time, we're both able to help the other with the things that are going on at home with the kids. So I don't know if you feel that way.
I think it's important for young dads to be involved. I think the kids need that. I've seen it be done the other way, where just the mom puts the kids to bed and this and that, and sure, that might work for some people, but I notice a difference in my kids when only one of us does it. I notice when I'm not the one doing it, like my mom will tell me, oh, they were asking for you, this and that. And we got into that pretty early in our relationship, where we would treat things sort of like a partnership. Like it would be 50-50. It wouldn't be you do more than me, or this is what has been taught to me before, or this is what I understand marriage to be. Like, no, marriage is a partnership. And even that has come up recently. Like, I've attended some pastors' seminars, and they've said, like, a little bit old school, but they've said, that this is still a thing in churches. How the man the husband will still say, oh, but I'm the head of the household. I think that comes with a lot of like insecurity. I think that comes with a lot of like just sticking with what has worked before, but not really, understanding that new things can be done and new things can be solved. And I think that that's a very slippery slope. To say that you are the head of a household, I think shows how much weak leadership you have. To have to say it. Instead of having that mutual understanding. There's nothing that like I will put off and say that's not my role. I've changed my kids' Pampers. I've been involved in every aspect of their growth and their development. I'm not sitting by the sidelines hoping that you will do it right. Or I think that that's intentional. I think that you have to be intentional as a man to want to do that, because that has to be a part of your nature. And I think that kids are going to notice that, and they're going to eventually, call you out on that. I saw that specifically in my household, and I did grow up to be, a kid who would say, wait a second, but that's not really fair. Oh, but why does the pressure fall on the mom? This and that. So even before relationships begin, obviously before marriages begin, I think that as a man, you should kind of know that. You should understand that this is my role. This is not just, a part that I'm playing in marriage. It's not to abuse of someone because the Bible says you should. The Bible doesn't say that, but because you misrepresent
That's what they understand.
Right. Okay. Because you misunderstood what it said in the Bible, first of all. there's a time and place for everything, but I think that those should be general discussions that people should have, even on dates. Nobody should wait to get married to find out who they married. And I think that that's very key for young people. I think that a lot of young people are kind of just winging it, hoping that something will land, that something will stick. And before you can eventually get into a marriage and find out what kind of partnership works for you, I think you have to have a good understanding of what you're willing to do.
Absolutely. And one thing that I love that you said is that the old school way of doing things was throwing around that I'm the head of the household. But I think that speaks to such a misunderstanding of what leadership is, because Christ is the head of the church. But that doesn't mean he made us do all the work. In fact, the opposite. As the head of the church, as, you know, the husband, and the Bible says that the church is the bride, he gave his life. He washed his disciples' feet. He went around doing miracles. Like, he had to do stuff too, or not that he had to, but he modeled this idea of a leader that serves. It's literally servant leadership. And honestly, you've done a great job, and not because we're on the podcast or because cameras are on or anything, but you've done an amazing job of being the head of our household in a way where you say, me being the head of the household doesn't mean I put all the work on you. It means that I do my part as well. And because you're like that, you know, a lot of people ask me, you know, this question, which is the question that filled my inbox. How do you guys do it? How do you guys do it? A lot of women ask me about me personally as well. Like, Vanna, how are you able to do all these things? And one of the answers really is you. And I'm not saying that to butter you up. Like, one of the answers really is, well, my husband helps me a lot. Like, a really good example I can think of is the 12 hours of worship that we just had at our church. We had a 12-hour worship service, and my husband had a 30-minute participation. I had a 30-minute participation. So he was giving a word. I was leading worship. We have these 3 kids between us that that's our day with our kids, which normally we're very jealous about our Saturdays. And that's something I'd like to discuss too, because we've had to put a lot of very safe and I think healthy boundaries to be able to spend time with our kids. But, you know, that this was an exception that we chose to make. And people sometimes even are confused. Like, when I came in the morning, when it was my turn to be here, I come in the morning and they're like, where are Rico and the kids? And I'm like, well, Rico's home with the kids. He's going to get them dressed. He's going to get them ready, and he's going to bring them here. And so the plan was, our kids got to be at home the first part of the day, because a 3-year-old and 2-year-olds don't really want to do 12 hours of worship, you know what I mean? But I could see how some couples will have this dynamic where it's like the woman has to be with the kids all day, but also do her worship participation, but also, you know, make sure she got them dressed. But it really was a partnership, because I picked out their clothes in the morning and I got the bag ready before I left. I came here, I came to church to start fulfilling my responsibilities at church. He was home, he got the kids dressed, he brought them to church, and then we did kind of like an exchange. And then I took the kids, well, they were in class for a little while, but eventually I took the kids and I took them home, and I was home the second half of the day while he was on stage. So it's just one example of how dividing the responsibilities is really what I think makes what people consider to be a quote unquote power couple. Because I think we look at people and we're like, oh, a power couple, but we don't realize that it takes both people working in the home to really make the power couple work. If not, what we're really saying is one of these people gets to shine. And I mean shine outside of the home, because there's absolutely nothing wrong with shining inside your home, which is your first ministry. But it's just that when we look at these power couples, it's 2 people who are doing things that are outside of the home. If both people don't help, that can't happen. That's impossible.
Yeah, and nobody's growing. All these power couples, or quote unquote, that we see on the internet, or these influencers, nobody's doing it at 100%. Like, they're each not working at their full 100% capacity. Someone is taking the brunt somewhere. Someone is actually putting in the work in somewhere. Either it be a babysitter, or it be, you know, someone who's out of sight, out of mind. Like, the only reason power couples are even around or can exist, or especially power parents, is because someone is dealing with something behind the scenes that's not what they're showing. Does that make sense? So I think that has to be understood, because I think that people will see these images, or will see you and say, wow, look at everything she has. Look at all the success or things she's able to do. But I'm taking some of the brunt of that work.
Absolutely.
My mom is taking some of the brunt of that work. Any babysitter that we get here from SYA or sometimes even the women's ministry, like they're dealing with the work. You get me? Like, it's not that we're able to just do this and, oh, I'm able to do this because my husband's taking care of it. No, sometimes I can't. And we have someone that hopefully we can count on consistently that can help us, and if not, we find someone. But it's not all about, we're doing it as best as we can 100% all the time. It's about finding a balance that will work for us and that will work for our kids too, because they're also a part of this.
And that's such a good point to bring up. Like, it really does take a village. Like, that's something that everybody says, but you're right. Like, people have no idea how many people help behind the scenes. Like, just this month, if I were to shout out all our babysitters, like shout out to Angie, Angelina, Michi, Jessie, Camila, your mom, my tia, my other tia. Like, so many people have to come together to allow you to do that, which is really part of the grace of God over our life, because I'm just so thankful every time, somebody's like, all right, I'll help you.
Yeah. And other people, we're aware that other people don't have that type of, help, but, we're very blessed to be able to do that. And sometimes it's not easy for us either, so people might assume, oh, but you guys lead the youth, you could just get anybody up in there. No, that's not really how it works. Even though it sounds good on paper, or you would think so. No, it doesn't work like that. So we try to be fair with ourselves and also with people who we ask to help us out with the kids.
Yeah, and one thing I've really been learning about that specifically recently is really putting it in God's hands. I got really frustrated this last month because Rico and I were doing a lot. We were both doing weekly discipleships at church. I was doing it twice a week because I was doing it once in English, once in Spanish, and then I was also doing my group mentorship, and he has the people that he mentored. Like, we were doing a lot, and it got really hard to find babysitters because we want to create that safe space for our kids where they go to sleep. I grew up as a pastor's kid, again, falling asleep in the chairs of the church, which, hey, that's what my parents had to do to make it work, and I am thankful and grateful for it. But my conviction for my family is, hey, I don't have to do that. So we try to always have our kids asleep. Like, we just don't see why, our kids would have to be here at night. They're so little and they should be able to get their rest, and they didn't choose ministry. We chose ministry. So we're very convicted of that, which is different for every family. We're just talking about, how we view it and how we make things work. But point is, we wanted our kids to be home resting, but it got frustrating by the end of the month. We're like, who else is going to be able to watch our kids for us? Like, how are we going to do this? And the Holy Spirit kind of led me into starting to pray this prayer of, Lord, if it's for me, if this is what you're calling me to do, if you're calling me to it, then you're going to grace me for it. And part of gracing me for it is providing someone who will say yes to the call, providing someone who's available. And if they're not available, then maybe I need to rethink how much I'm doing, and maybe I need to draw those boundaries again, because that's something that I mentioned that I do want to discuss. We've drawn boundaries around how we're going to do ministry. Ministry is not boundaryless for us, and I don't think that it ever should be. And what I mean by that is, ministry doesn't mean I'm going to work myself ragged and not eat and not sleep and not take care of my family and have my kids not see me because I'm doing ministry. My house and my home and my spiritual life and my body and my marriage is my first ministry. So when I see that those things are deteriorating, and when I see that these things that God has given me to enjoy, and not only to enjoy but to take care of, are deteriorating and not getting the attention they deserve, then I need to relook at my boundaries. And I see it like boundaries on a map, and I need to say, maybe I need to pull these in a little bit and take some time off. So that's even something that I started to implement this year. Well, I'll have a month of really hard work, and then I'll have a month of rest. This month is my month of rest, and I'm home most of the nights this week, and I'm saying no to going out to most of the places that I used to say yes to, because I'm trying to take care of that. And you've taught me a lot about that, because your boundaries are a lot better drawn than mine are, because I tend to like to say yes to everything people ask me.
I'm also very introvert, so
that helps. Yeah.
By default, I'm usually going to say no. That's part of the reason why I have trouble even doing podcasts or Instagram Live. I don't like it. But in any case, I want to jump back into something that you said about kids. Our kids didn't choose to have pastor parents. Our kids are not pastors' kids, technically. Does that make sense? They are just kids. And I think that, and maybe I'm like not even coming off from the right foot because I didn't help found a church, but I need it to be understood that something that I've always understood, especially being involved in ministry, was that I wasn't going to prioritize the ministry over my family. Yeah. And I needed to really make that clear because our kids shouldn't have to suffer because we want to help other people.
Yeah.
I think that the first people we should help is our family, our kids. They're the ones whose needs should be taken care of first, and then we should have, if we have the strength, we should, take it to everyone else. And I've been really intentional about that because sometimes you don't have the energy or the strength to deal with people. Sometimes you don't have the energy to give someone 5 minutes because you have to be home for bedtime, and I've always been more of the one of like, okay, but I can't do this right now. Could we do this on Tuesday? Because I need to be home with my family. Does that make sense? Yeah. Whereas opposed to, I've heard of other ministers who they give it their all, but then they go home and they don't really have anything left. Yeah. And they're tired and they're burnt out. And when they get home, like what's left of them is what they give their family. And I don't know. I feel like that's such a very slippery slope to live by because you're not being intentional, and it's almost like you're kind of propping your ministry up to, but I gotta go do this, but I have to do that. Oh, but you don't understand, my church is going to be empty on Sunday. First of all, like if that's how bad the case is that you need to be the one to fill the seats in your church, then something is wrong. Something is wrong. It's not you who does it, it's the Holy Spirit, Absolutely. Who's going to bring people to help fill the seats because your anointing is there, because the power is there, and the consistency is there. Those three things I think are going to help you grow your ministry. But besides that, your family needs you. Yeah. Your family needs you 100%. So I did want to say that because I need to, Levi needs to know that he's my son first, that he's not a pastor's kid. He'll hear pastor's kid from other people, but he's not going to hear it from me. This is something he has to be called to do. There's that expectation of, oh, you're my son, you're going to run the church when you grow up. It doesn't have to be like that. Although I understand the sentiment, I don't think it should be like that, So that's just my 2 cents on that.
Yeah, and I feel like you coming from a non-pastor's kid home helps you bring a lot of that balance, because me growing up as a pastor's kid, I think that all pastors' kids have issues with boundaries, not to go back to that word or to beat a dead horse, but even what you're saying, that's what that is, because the definition of boundaries, for anybody who doesn't know, it's simply not taking on a responsibility that is not my responsibility so that I have strength and ability to fulfill my actual responsibilities. And the thing with the pastoring world is that a lot of them have taken on the problems and the issues of the entire flock, the entire congregation, and then do not have strength, like you said, to deal with what the Lord has actually given them. And this doesn't mean that pastors don't help people with what they're going through. That is what a pastor does. However, I need to know that there's a limit to that. My job is to give you the word. My job is to instruct you. My job is to pray with you, love you through it, but I don't have to do that to the detriment of my family. In fact, I shouldn't do that to the detriment of my family, because God is a good God, and if he gives pastors children, it's so that those children can also have parents that are available and there and loving and creating a safe and secure environment for them. That's the design. But going back to what I was saying, I think all pastors' kids kind of have trouble with this, because pastors have trouble with this, because I want to love people and I want to be there for my community and I want to be all that I can be and I want to be fulfilling the call and I want to be a Christ-like loving leadership for people. So we're kind of always kind of playing with those limits and kind of like, okay, so do I respond to this person today? Because if not, they're going to go home and struggle with suicidal thoughts, or do I not? And I think the key there is being led by the Holy Spirit. I think a lot of pastors, and I don't mean this in any disrespectful way, but we all have that temptation to do it in our own strength, because like you said, it's a Tuesday night and we're tired and we want to be there and we want to give and we want to give, but we haven't taken the time out to ask the Holy Spirit for greater discernment to know if this needs to be today or can it wait till another day, so that I can fulfill my God-given responsibility. The only thing that cannot be delegated or can never be anybody else's role is your family. And that's so important, because I can delegate things in the church. I can delegate the worship. I can delegate some of the organization, or sometimes I can give it to the Lord and trust it, like you said, and say, Lord, you're going to have to do this because I don't have the bandwidth or I don't have the strength to do it. But I can never delegate parenting.
There's only one you, and you are irreplaceable. Your kid's not going to appreciate, you sending a leader to go help them put them down for bedtime. They need you. And that has to be spoken about more. I don't really hear people talk about this. I'm glad that we are, because the stories that we've heard are countless of people who were born into ministry, and the ministry took their parents to Honduras or Colombia or this and that, and it took them on this whole journey, and the kids were here at home in school dealing with things that their parents don't even find out about, because they're building a quote-unquote ministry, and that's great, and they are building a ministry, but their first ministry is kind of taking a hit, and there's only one you're irreplaceable. And I think that if anyone's hearing this and they're kind of like, well, that's easy for them to say, we created a system where we're able to be, the forebearers, the ones carrying the torch in our family. And that's, I think, what we're only trying to highlight. We're not here trying to, come after anyone or the things they've done. But I think it needs to be a priority.
Yeah, we're just saying what worked for us. And I do want to mention also that, because somebody could be listening to this and be like, well, that's easy for them to say. It's not easy for us to say, because when you have dreams, because in this case I'm talking not only about ministry, but I also have dreams for my businesses. I have books I want to write. He has films he wants to make and books he wants to write as well. Like, it comes with so much sacrifice. It's not easy to say. I started this podcast off saying we say no to a lot. I feel like I say no to more things than I say yes to, which is something that our friend Normandy, shout out to Norm if you're watching. Norm used to always say that to me when I was younger. He was my youth pastor when I was young. And he used to always say, when you're truly living in the will of God, you're going to have more no's than you have yeses. And I didn't understand it, because at that time I wasn't getting invited to preach. I was 16 when he's telling me this, and I'm like, okay, I guess. But it's true. Like, that specific thing that Norm said, like, man, that rings so true, because we have to say no to dinners. We have to say no to sometimes hanging out with friends. Shout out to any one of my friends who I haven't hung out with a while. I love you guys. But sometimes I have to say no, because, you're prioritizing these things. And I remember being younger, when I was a teen, I think was the first time that I realized that my parents were doing this. But when we were growing up, my parents both got invited to speak to different places all around the world. And they were pastoring a big church, and they had 4 kids at home. And I remember my parents' boundary was they only went out to preach once a month. They would only go out to another ministry that wasn't ours once a month. So if ever we didn't see our parents, unless it was unless there was an exception that was made, it was 1 weekend a month. And they were also very strict about like getting there like right before the event and then coming back within like 72 hours or something like that. Like, they'd leave and come right back. And I remember being impressed as a teen by that, because it did click in my mind. I go first. My parents want to be home more than they want to be outside of the home. They showed me that with their actions. They never told me. They never said, we're doing this because we love you guys even more than we love fulfilling our dreams and, being who we feel like God has created us to be. We love you guys more, but it wasn't because they looked me in the eye and said that. It's because I saw them drawing boundaries to protect me and to be with me. And because of that, even though my parents were pastoring a big church, and even though they spoke all around the world, I saw them and I was with them. And so a lot of people ask me, like, how are all, and my brothers were on the podcast last time, and they mentioned how they did have a time where they backslid. But for the most part, all of us are here. And we don't have a hatred for the church. We have a love for the church. But that came with sacrifice from my parents, because they were sacrificing income. Let's be real. Pastors, part of their income comes from when they accept invitations from outside. So it's a supplemental income. They were sacrificing income. They were sacrificing opportunities. They were sacrificing, back in those days, there wasn't like Facebook and Instagram, but, they were sacrificing more people knowing them and their ministry growing. And so it might seem like, oh, that's easy to say, but it's not that easy to say. You're sacrificing.
Yeah, there's no I remember when I was like in my teens, I would think, "Oh, I'm just going to grow up and I'm going to do these few things and you know, from there I'm just going to be able to grow in those areas and stick to that and that's it." You know, kind of like constantly winning mentality. And I see that there's obviously one, a lot of challenges, but two, there are lots of different ways that people can be divided. And just because you're doing 100% in one area doesn't mean you're doing it in all areas. If you're completely devoted to your dream, if you are, you know, working not even 9 to 5, if you're working 9 to 9 in this one thing that's going to fulfill you, that's great. But in some area, you're lacking. In some area, you need, whether it be even just your rest. If you're a single guy out there, you're listening to this, you're like, that doesn't apply to me. No, in some area, you are not fully doing it. You understanding that you can pursue your dream is great. Making time for it is amazing. But lacking in other areas is going to catch up to you. And if you are a father listening to this and you're like, but I want to pursue this, I want to do that, that's great. And you can, but create a space for it. Make a time for it. Prioritize it. One of the things that I started doing is after bedtime, when the kids are all sleeping, you and I will be up. Maybe you'll be watching a show, but what will I be doing? I'll be doing research. How can I do this? How can I do that? But what if I wanted to run with that idea? How complex is it? You know, let me watch tutorials. Let me see what's going on. I make a space for it. You know, like one of the things that I did recently was I wrote like a 10-page screenplay, this film that I had an idea based on like the metaverse and all this stuff that's going on. Nobody knows about that. Like nobody knows about it, but I was able to do that because I created a space for it, because I had a moment, you know, and I was really inspired, and I hashed it out and I, you know, came up with it, and I'm able to do that because I'm able to succeed in other areas, not just, you know, lack in other areas. And I think that that's important for young people to understand, and for everybody to understand, really. But it's very practical, because if you don't prioritize some of the other areas that you're lacking in, then eventually once they do catch up, you're going to just fall apart, you know, and your dreamer's going to be like, but I used to be so into that. I hear people say that, especially guys. I used to be so into that, but then I just stopped. Why? Because what they were hiding from or running from or not prioritizing at that time eventually caught up to them, and it consumed them. So
yeah. And I want to say this about what you're saying. It takes discipline to create those spaces, because the reason why you have that space is because you and I were very disciplined. And I want to say this to answer the question that people were asking of how do you do it. And I remember, I'm going to say this as well. I remember a long time ago hearing Brooke Fraser, which is a worshiper that I really love. She said, discipline leaves room for creativity. You are able to have that creativity because you were disciplined enough, and I was disciplined enough to create this habit for our kids where they're going to bed early. And so a lot of people look at us and they're like, wow, you guys are so lucky that your kids go to sleep at 7 p.m. And it's like, no, we have been working on that since they got home from the hospital, and it's not too late if, you know, we train them. They know. But that's a consistent and disciplined thing we're doing every night. We're not like doing it Monday and then Tuesday, oh, we're tired today, like just stay up if you want to stay up, or like, you know, don't pick up your toys, it's fine.
From people, we've heard them say, oh, but that's too strict, oh, but this and that. Well, okay, maybe it is, or maybe it isn't, because I don't see it as too strict. I see it as something that works for us.
It's a discipline. It is what it is. It's not that it's strict. It's a discipline. Jordan Peterson says the definition of morality is something that you can repeat frequently. And so we have created this repeatable cycle that it looks too strict, but look what that strictness gives you. That strictness gives you freedom. You know, you're putting your kids to 7 p.m., but then you have between 7 and whatever time. If you're Rico, 12, 1 in the morning. If you're me, I have a smaller resistance. Yeah. So I have like between 9, 10 o'clock, and then I'm out. But, you know, where we have time to write. We have time to, I'll watch a show. I'll, you know, take a bath. I'll, embrace some self-care. But I'm able to do that because of the discipline that I've created. And discipline is something you create, and it's something you do. It doesn't come by accident. So no, we're not lucky. We're not, oh my gosh, we got kids that did that automatically. And the Lord was smiling down at us, and we looked out. He was smiling down at us because I'm so grateful for our children. But it was something we did on purpose. We intentionally said, how are we going to structure our family day? Okay, we're going to do it this way. And so I wanted to throw that in there because, it is easy sometimes to listen to other people on a podcast and be like, well, that sure would be great if our kids went to sleep early and we could do things at nighttime. You can. You just have to, work at it and do it.
I read the story one time. It kind of ties into what we're saying, but I read the story about the rapper Eminem. You know who he is?
I do know who he is. The real Slim Shady.
Oh, wow. You do know who he is.
I went to the halftime Super Bowl. Well, I didn't go there.
Went?
I watched it. It.
You didn't invite me? That must have been cool, huh?
It was in our sala.
Anyway.
You could come if you wanted to.
Oh, yeah, that's right. I was there. But anyway, I read the story about Eminem one time where he was working with like this younger rapper, and like this younger rapper who's like up and coming was like observing him and like watching everything he did and like learning from him. And he ended up doing the interview about this, and he said that he would notice that Eminem got there right at 9 a.m. to the studio, and he would be working, and he's like, okay. And he'd look at him and he'd go, you want to go to lunch? And he'd be like, yeah, what the heck, let's go to lunch, Eminem. And he'd go and come back, and he'd come back and like they'd keep working on the song, this and that, halfway through the first verse and whatever the case was. And at 5 p.m. he's like, okay, he grabs his keys, and Eminem was like in his car out of here. And he's like,
he worked a 9 to 5.
Did he really just leave? And that the guy was like stuck, and he's like, wait a second, like usually, you have an idea, you go with it until the end of the night, no matter what. And he's like, okay. And the next day he showed up again at 9 a.m. and Eminem pulled up, and he's like, okay, let's keep working on the song. And he's like, hey man, let me ask you, like, why is it that you like went home at 5? Like, what's up with that? And he's like, and it's funny because I forget what exactly, but this is the sense that he said. He said, this is my job. If it becomes too stressful, if it becomes too annoying, if it becomes too burdensome, it's not fun anymore. And also, I really want to see my kids. So that's Eminem saying that. And the guy had a better understanding. The younger rapper had a better understanding. He's like, wait a second. Like, he's right. Like, he could take on that younger mentality of like, but no, we need to hash out this song. Let's be here all night until the song is finished. Sure, that's great. But like I said earlier, in some areas you're going to be lacking. And that's what Eminem knew. And he understood, like, wait a second. This isn't, if I have to work more than I have to, this isn't fun anymore. And if I want to keep working at this, like, I have to understand that it comes with a sense of boundary. Mm-hmm. And I think that that's so important. How often do we create a space to, one, work within our dream, but two, to say, no, that's enough of that. I need to work. I need to go work at home. I need to go be with my family. I need to, make them a priority too, not just my dream. I think that was really challenging. And even me reading that, I had a better sense of like priority even. I was like, wow, that's so true. Like we can treat this so much like a job. We can treat this so much like this is what I need to do. But we should also, be really intentional on pursuing our family as soon as it's over. As soon as it's over, that's great. This has been good. Hey, I'd love to stay and talk with you for a few more minutes, but I got to go be with my family, So, yeah, I mean, if Slim Shady's doing it, who are we to say,
Interesting.
Do you not hold yourself to the Eminem standard?
I do, but I do in that regard. I don't know 100% what the Eminem standard is in other regards, but I will say, not only does your family benefit from that kind of thought process, but your work benefits too. That's what people don't realize, that you can't really get real results at anything in your life without consistency, and you cannot develop consistency with impossible work standards or working in bursts. And that's what I used to do. Like my makeup, my wiring, I guess you could say, is a very passionate wiring, which means that I used to do the opposite of what Eminem was doing. I'll stay all night and I'll run myself ragged until the project is over, until the conference is happening. And then after the conference, I'll be so exhausted that I'll drop off the face of the map for 2 weeks. And then I'll do it all over again. And you're never going to get real results like that, because it's like you're taking a few steps forward and then you're taking steps back, and then you're taking a few steps forward and you're taking steps back. When I understood and I began to develop a healthy work life where it's like I am constantly moving forward in small steps every day, but I'm always making progress, but it's a sustainable progress. It's a progress like Eminem, like I'm going to work from 9 to 5. I love how I never thought on the Maven House podcast that there was going to be a thing like like Eminem, but I'm making this sustainable progress forward, but this is something I can sustain. And that when I started doing that in every area of my life is when I really started to get results. That's when I started mentoring people, because I had like this aha moment where I was like, wait a second. And most of the people that I mentor are not lazy. Most of the people that I mentor are not incapable. They are just operating off of that. They're working in huge bursts and that they're unable to sustain. And that made the difference in my health life when I said, okay, I'm going to stop doing these fad diets that I go crazy and I'm not eating this and I'm not eating that and I'm going to the gym every single day, twice a day, and I lose weight really quickly, but then I fall off the wagon because it's not sustainable. When I stopped working that way, when I stopped doing ministry that way, when I stopped when I began to, like you say, create spaces for rest before I'm exhausted, before I'm burnt out. I had a really big month last month, so I created a February of rest. I created a month of rest. I'm making myself rest and monitoring my pace so that I can recreate it, so that I can do it again. Because if not, I could have kept on going. I'm like, okay, well, this, instead of being a 4-week discipleship that I'm doing twice a week, I'm going to make it 12 weeks or 16 weeks. But maybe I would never want to do it again.
Mm-hmm. Maybe you would end up hating what you're doing.
Absolutely. I probably would have. And so I think that restraint is a big part of which you don't normally identify with being productive. But restraint is a big part of being productive. Let me restrain now so that I have energy and space and time and strength.
Yeah, that's the best way to prevent achieving. That's the best way to prevent burnout. Knowing when your boundaries are, coming to an end, and knowing how much time you have left on a project. I remember I used to hear this saying. Somebody told this to me: "Don't lead well, be well, so that you can lead well." And that helped me out so much, because with that comes a sense of I can't do this anymore. With that comes a sense of I need to clock out right now. With that comes a sense of I would love to help you, but I need to help myself right now first. And I think that if a lot of pastors understood that, if they started practicing that and being really intentional, started saying no more often than they started saying yes, you would be so less susceptible to being burnt out. Mm-hmm. You would find out that in the morning you have new strengths, that you have new ideas, that you have a new focus, that you have like this renewed sense of purpose, that even you can focus on things that maybe weren't even on your radar because you've allowed yourself to have some space to be well. Allowing yourself to be well could simply just be saying no to a phone call, saying no past 5 p.m. I know that there's a pastor, he's really good friends of ours. He really, really prioritizes the Sabbath, and his church knows it. His youth know it. Nobody can reach him on a Saturday. He's probably home. But if you try to call him with some nonsense about, hey, we need to solve this, but he's going to hang up on you. Like, he's so strict with his Sabbath, and in a sense, we kind of all should be. But he's so strict with it that it's a thing now. But he's like, I needed this more than ever. I needed to say no to my week. I needed to say no to people. I needed a space where I could just be me with my family. Sometimes my wife will even say, go for a drive, go somewhere. So that he can like recalibrate. And I think that that's so important. Having a healthy understanding of what you're emotionally able to carry is going to be so pivotal. If you're a pastor, not even if you're a pastor, because all these titles, if you're just a person, having a sense of what you're able to carry emotionally will really, really help you understand like that some things are more a burden than they are a help to you. And nobody should be carrying that many burdens to say to themselves like, oh yeah, but at least God is happy, like Is he really? Did he tell you to carry those burdens?
Yep.
Did he tell you to, be dealing with people's stress, be dealing with people's issues, sometimes issues you warned them not to get into, and now you're carrying the result of what they're dealing with now? Does that make sense? Like, people stumble, yes. People fall, yes. But when you specifically told that individual not to be involved in that, it shouldn't be but now I need to save them because I told them not to do this. Like, pastors, people that lead people need to chill. Managers, leaders, we need to chill. We need to really understand that we need to focus on ourselves first before we can even think about focusing on anybody else. And I think that with that comes, an understanding of you needing to focus on your family.
Absolutely. And I want to add on to there, because there might be somebody listening who's saying, well, boundaries are selfish. They're not Christ-like. Christ loved the church unto death, and I need to love people unto death. And because that used to be me until I realized that I had a real boundary problem. And that's why I had all these, I had a problem with boundaries, because I grew up, like I said, I grew up serving people, watching my parents love on people and serve people. And I thought that if somebody was asking something of me, how dare I say no? Who do I think I am? I have to give it, until I realized something key that you just said, a phrase that you just said. You said, sometimes it's more than what you're able to do. So yes, there are things that you are going to lovingly sacrifice to do for others. That should never stop. That should always be something that you're incorporating into your lifestyle as a leader. You should be a servant leader. We're not saying, and I know my husband, I know that he is the guy that will stay sometimes and talk to the youth that needs it. He is the guy that, I've been in the car before waiting while he's having conversations with youth. There's a balance to it, because I also don't want to feel like I'm giving anybody free reign, like, oh, well then, if I don't want to do it, I don't have to do it. That's not the standard here. The standard is, if you're not able to do it, then you need to bring it to God and say, God, I'm putting it in your hands. Because I feel like a lot of times the lack of boundaries issue, it also is a control issue. I want everybody to be well, and I feel like it's my responsibility to make them well. I want people to not sin that are in my ministry, so it's my responsibility to keep them out of sin. So if I have to drive, to wherever they are to stop them physically from sinning, I will stop them physically from sinning. But we can't control everything. There are some things that are simply, like I said a little while ago, the definition of boundaries is not doing things that are not your responsibility. Now, that does not mean that you stop doing things that are your responsibility. There are things as pastors that we need to do, whether we want it or not. We can't all of a sudden be like, well, services, that's kind of stressful. We're not doing that. And, dealing with people in general, we're just not going to do that either. Like, there are things that it is your responsibility to do. And I think that's why it's so important, though, to never leave out of your leadership the guidance of the Holy Spirit, because he's the only one who can really tell you what he's calling you to do versus what you want to do, or versus what you're trying to avoid. Because then there are times, I'm saying all of this just to kind of bring a little bit of balance. There are times where I'll be like, nope, boundaries, not picking up that phone call. And I'll feel a prompting from the Holy Spirit with him saying, today you'll be okay, pick it up. Today you'll be okay. I still have that boundary. I don't remove that boundary altogether. I simply allow myself to be led by him. When there are other times that I look at it and, I'll text the person back and I'll be like, hey, let's talk tomorrow. And the person will be like, okay, no problem. Because it really wasn't dire. It really wasn't urgent. And I think a lot of the things that we need to work on as leadership and as people and as pastors and as Christians is remembering once again to hear from the Holy Spirit.
Well, faith. I'm glad you said faith, because a lot of this has to do with faith.
Absolutely.
A lot of this has to do with our own trust in our own organization, in ourselves. But I think that one of the ways that God is going to honor your faith is by what I'm saying is, one of the ways God wants to honor your faith is by seeing how little you try to control it. If you try to control every aspect of your ministry, there's very little faith for God to work. If you try to control every aspect of every relationship you have, of every person, but if I let them down, they're not going to come to church on Sunday. That right there is complete control and the lack of faith.
Yeah.
What is faith if not the lack of control? What is faith if not the lack of understanding? It's quite literally in the word where faith is the I'm literally blanking on the verse.
Which verse is it?
The
essence of things unseen, the certainty of what you hope for.
Exactly. The essence of things unseen. It's so important that we have a sense of what that is, because things unseen is things that we can't control.
Mm-hmm.
And so much of ministry is things that you can't control. And I think that for pastors to think that they can, or to try and make everyone happy, I think that's going to hurt you more than it's going to help you, especially in a ministry. So,
and man, you want to control it so bad. And it's not just ministry, because I feel the same way in my business. There are days when I wake up and I'm like, if I don't hustle today, I'm not going to have a business, and it's just going to all go downhill, and my kids, they're not going to have anything to go to college with. Like, you put so much on you, but like you said, faith is being able to take that and say, this is not on me. This is on the Lord. Like, if he called me for it, he will grace me for it. He will provide for it. I need to do, and even Jesus said it. Jesus said, you need to worry about today. He said, worry about today. Tomorrow will have its own worries. And the revelation of that I received is the only thing I should be worrying about are the things I need to do today, or that I can handle today, or that God is leading me through today. And if there is nothing like that in this circumstance, so like when I wake up every day, I need to do what Maven House needs that day, and it doesn't mean I don't plan ahead, but it's, I'm planning ahead, and every day I am worrying about Maven House that day. I cannot wake up every day and worry about, is Maven House going to be a huge failure in the future? Is this podcast going to tank? Am I going to say something and get canceled one day? I can't think about that every day, because you're right. I don't have control, and faith is being able to say, I'm okay with not having that control. And when you let go of that control, that's when you can do things like rest. That's when you can say, okay, I'm going to go home and I'm going to take care of my family. I'm going to go home and I'm going to put my kids to bed. Even if this meeting, even if we need to meet about more, even if it needs to be more excellent, even if this conference is not done being planned, I'm going to go home and I'm going to rest, and I'm going to refresh, and I'm going to come back tomorrow morning, because at the end of the day, if God wants it to work out, it's going to work out, and he's going to lead me to do the best I can with it.
There's a lot of truth in what Jesus said, obviously. When he said, don't worry about tomorrow, let tomorrow worry about itself.
Mm-hmm.
That's so key, because we'll try to control tomorrow. We'll try to tell people, oh, okay, tomorrow we'll do this, and we jot down and we give a full list. And while we have plans on that list, we don't know what God's plans are for that list.
Yeah.
Where's there room for God to move? Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Where's there room for him to even do anything new? He wanted us to be intentional about our today. He wanted to be intentional about what you are able to accomplish today. He wasn't telling us, hey, don't put things on the calendar for the week or for the month. He was really asking us to have a sense of purpose about today.
Yeah.
And not try to control tomorrow, not try to control moves of God or Holy Spirit, do this tomorrow. No, like only he can control those aspects.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's so key, because so many times we'll hear about, or even I'll say something like, oh no, but tomorrow this, tomorrow that, with this full expectation of what it should look like. And then I come and I show up on the day and it's nothing like what I envisioned or had planned. And I think back on that and I'm like, man, this should have been less me, more of the Holy Spirit.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for being on the podcast. We're out of time for what'd you say? Oh, we're out of time for today. But I think that's a great place to wrap up. And I'm very thankful. And I think you did an amazing job. And I hope you come back.
I'll think about it.
Okay. Well, you didn't say no. So you're saying there's a chance. There's a 1 in a million chance. But you're saying there's a chance. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. If you enjoyed this conversation, if you enjoyed the Maven House podcast, it would mean the world to me if you share it on your social media. If you follow me, you can just kind of share the clips that I'm going to upload to your stories and let people know that you liked it. We'll see you guys next time. Bye.
you.